Eleanor, at 66, felt the weight of 2 years pressed down on her, heavier than any physical burden she'd ever carried. 2 years of living under the oppressive roof of her son Ethan's home, transformed from a mother into something akin to a live-in servant, all under the chilling gaze of his wife, Serafina. Each day blurred into the next, marked by chores that grew steadily more demanding, and words that chipped away at her spirit, leaving her hollowed out and weary. She often found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, not quite recognizing the tired, gray-haired woman who looked back, a stranger in her own skin, a ghost in her own son's house. Today, she had hoped to break the suffocating tension, if only for a few precious hours. Ethan, her son, had been working late shifts, and Eleanor missed their old, easy conversations, the ones that used to fill her kitchen with laughter and the smell of home-cooked meals. She remembered the warmth of those days, the simple joy of nourishing her family. With a flicker of that old maternal instinct, she decided to prepare his favorite meal. Roasted chicken, golden brown and glistening, accompanied by fluffy mashed potatoes and a medley of garden vegetables. She moved slowly, her hands, gnarled by arthritis, carefully seasoning the poultry. Each movement a testament to a love that, despite everything, still stubbornly persisted. The aroma filled the kitchen, a nostalgic scent of comfort and home. A stark contrast to the usual antiseptic quiet that permeated the house. Just as Eleanor was carefully transferring the perfectly cooked chicken to a serving platter, the kitchen door swung open with a sharp, impatient creak. Serafina entered, her presence immediately sucking the warmth out of the room. She surveyed the scene, her eyes narrowed, her lips thinning into a familiar line of distaste. Her gaze fell upon the roasted chicken, and she scoffed, a low, dismissive sound that always sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "This looks terrible, Eleanor," Serafina declared, her voice laced with a condescension that had become her signature. She didn't even bother to approach the table, standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, her eyes fixated on the platter. "Look at this grease. Honestly, can't you do anything right?" Eleanor flinched, her fragile hope dissolving instantly. For 40 years, she had cooked for her family, for neighbors, for countless church potlucks. Her roast chicken was legendary, a dish everyone clamored for. Never, not once in 4 decades, had she received a complaint, let alone such a harsh, public condemnation. The humiliation burned, a hot flush spreading across her face. She felt a familiar ache in her chest, a mixture of hurt and disbelief that this woman, her son's wife, could so casually dismantle her pride. Serafina, seemingly emboldened by Eleanor's silence, stepped closer, her voice rising in pitch and venom. "You know, Ethan works hard to provide for us, and the least you could do is pull your weight. But no, you're just nothing but dead weight, a burden. What exactly do you contribute, Eleanor? You don't pay bills, you barely keep up with the chores. You just eat our food and take up space." Each word was a deliberate jab, finding its mark with cruel precision. Eleanor felt her knees tremble, her vision blurring at the edges. She wanted to retort, to remind Serafina of the years she had spent raising Ethan, of the home she had once provided, of the love she had poured into their lives. But the words caught in her throat, choked by the sheer enormity of Serafina's disdain. Without warning, Serafina reached out, her hand lashing out with surprising speed. She snatched the serving plate with the roasted chicken from the table. Eleanor gasped, but it was too late. With a furious grunt, Serafina brought the plate down, not on the table, but directly onto the pristine tile floor. The ceramic shattered with a violent crash that echoed through the otherwise silent house, sending shards flying like shrapnel. Roasted chicken, golden skin now marred with gravy and ceramic dust, splattered across the floor, some pieces even striking Eleanor's apron. The rich aroma of dinner was instantly replaced by the metallic tang of anger and the acrid smell of broken dreams. "Clean it up," Serafina commanded, her voice dangerously low, almost a whisper, yet radiating absolute authority. Her eyes, cold and triumphant, locked onto Eleanor's, and I mean every single piece. Now, Eleanor's arthritic hands, which had so lovingly prepared the meal, now felt stiff and unresponsive. The thought of bending down, of picking up the shattered pieces, sent a sharp pang through her joints. But Serafina wasn't finished. She stepped over the mess, her designer shoes carefully avoiding the fragments of food and ceramic. She leaned in, her voice now a chilling hiss that barely reached Eleanor's ears. "Let me make something clear, Eleanor. If you're not helping with the bills, then you'll be my maid. Consider this your new job description, and if you can't even handle that, then I don't know what you're good for." The ultimatum hung in the air, a final, brutal blow. Eleanor sank to her knees, the pain in her joints almost overshadowed by the crushing weight in her chest. Tears, hot and bitter, finally spilled down her weathered cheeks, mixing with the gravy and chicken fat that had splattered onto her apron. Her hands, trembling uncontrollably, reached out to begin the arduous, humiliating task of picking up the broken ceramic pieces, each shard a tiny splinter in her heart. Just then, the distinct sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. Heavy footsteps, familiar and unmistakable, began to move down the hallway. Ethan was home. A wave of fresh panic washed over Eleanor. The last thing she wanted was for him to see her like this, on her knees, crying over spilled food and shattered dreams. She scrambled, trying to wipe away her tears, to compose herself. But it was useless. The scene was too stark, too undeniable. Ethan entered the dining room, his tie already loosened, a briefcase clutched in his hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the tableau before him. Eleanor, on the floor amidst the wreckage of dinner, her face streaked with tears and gravy. Serafina, standing tall and immaculate, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, radiating an air of calm victory. A tense silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The only sounds were the distant hum of the refrigerator and Eleanor's ragged breathing. She slowly looked up at Ethan, her gaze pleading, desperate for concern, for understanding, for any sign that the son she had raised was still there, somewhere beneath the surface. But his face was a mask, unreadable, devoid of any discernible emotion. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan's gaze flickered between his wife and his mother, then settled on the smashed plate and scattered food. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet, almost detached. "What happened here?" Eleanor watched Serafina's lips curve into a sweet, practiced smile, a mask of innocent concern. Her daughter-in-law turned to Ethan, her eyes wide and earnest, as if she were the victim of a grave misunderstanding. "Your mother had a little accident with lunch, darling." Serafina cooed, her voice sickeningly saccharine, entirely devoid of the venomous edge it had held moments before. She gestured vaguely at the shattered plate and scattered food. "I was just explaining to her that if she's going to live here, she needs to understand her responsibilities. It's a lot to ask, I know. But we all have to pull our weight, don't we?" Eleanor braced herself, her heart sinking with a familiar, weary resignation. This was the pattern. Always the pattern. Serafina would spin a tale, and Ethan, without fail, would accept it, casting a disappointed glance her way, or worse, delivering a gentle but firm lecture about contributing and keeping the peace. Eleanor had long ago learned to expect this betrayal, each instance a fresh splinter in her already fractured spirit. She prepared herself for the usual sting of his words, the confirmation of her insignificance in their life. Her eyes, still blurred with tears, fixed on the floor, unable to meet his gaze. But then, something shifted. A subtle, almost imperceptible change in the air. In Ethan's posture, Eleanor dared a quick, upward glance, catching the sudden hardening of his jaw, the faint narrowing of his eyes. It was a spark, small yet undeniable, a flicker of fury she hadn't seen in years, not since he was a boy, defending a smaller classmate from a bully, or standing up to a stern teacher who had unfairly accused her. It was the fire of righteous indignation she remembered from his childhood, a fierce protectiveness that had always been directed at those he loved. Could it be? Was it possible it was directed at her? Now, the thought was so foreign, so utterly unexpected, it felt like a jolt. Instead of scolding her, instead of even acknowledging the mess, Ethan took 2 deliberate steps. He walked past the splattered chicken and ceramic shards as if they were invisible. He knelt, his movements surprisingly gentle, right there beside Eleanor amidst the wreckage. His strong, warm hand reached out, brushing against her arm. "Mom," he said, his voice low, a timbre she hadn't heard directed at her in so long, a mixture of tenderness and deep concern. He helped her slowly, carefully, to her feet, supporting her weight as she struggled with her stiff, aching knees. The simple act, the unexpected kindness, sent a tremor through Eleanor. It was a physical comfort she hadn't realized how desperately she craved. Serafina, meanwhile, stood frozen, her confident smile faltering, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated confusion and irritation. Her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before her eyes. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she protested, her voice rising, a sharp edge returning to it. She gestured emphatically at the mess. "She needs to clean this up. She made the mess." "You saw her." Ethan turned, his hand still resting lightly on Eleanor's arm, anchoring her. His gaze, now steely and unwavering, met Serafina's. "No," he stated, his voice calm but undeniably firm, cutting through Serafina's protest. "She didn't." Serafina's eyes widened, disbelief warring with outrage. "What do you mean she didn't?" she challenged, her voice climbing. "I saw her drop the plate, Ethan. You just walked in. You don't know what happened." "Stop," Ethan interjected, his voice still measured, but laced with a new, quiet authority that brokered no argument. "Just stop talking, Serafina." He released Eleanor's arm gently, then turned fully to face his wife. The air crackled with a tension that was different now, heavy with an unspoken power shift. Ethan's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a depth Eleanor hadn't seen in years. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice devoid of anger, yet infused with an underlying steel that sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "For months now. I've been watching how you treat my mother." Serafina's face, which had been flushed with indignation, suddenly went pale. Her eyes darted nervously between Ethan and Eleanor, a flicker of genuine fear replacing her earlier bravado. She forced a strained, weak laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan," she stammered, attempting to feign ignorance, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. "I've done nothing but try to help your mother adjust. She's forgetful sometimes, you know. And sensitive." Ethan didn't respond with words. Instead, he walked past her, his movements deliberate. He approached the old mahogany buffet that stood against the far wall of the dining room. From one of its intricately carved drawers, he retrieved a tiny, almost imperceptible black object. It was a small camera, no larger than his thumb, barely visible to the naked eye. He held it up, not accusingly, but with a quiet certainty. "Because I have hours of footage that says otherwise," he stated, his voice a low, steady rumble that filled the sudden silence. Serafina gasped, a sharp, choked sound. Her eyes, wide with horror, fixed on the small device in his hand. "You've been recording me?" she whispered, the color draining completely from her face. The word was a raw accusation, laced with betrayal. Ethan's gaze hardened. "I've been protecting my mother," he corrected her, his voice imbued with a regretful, yet firm, resolve. "Something I should have done a long time ago." He pulled out his phone, navigating swiftly through its menus. A moment later, a voice filled the room, eerily clear, unmistakable. It was Serafina's voice, harsh and cutting, echoing the very words Eleanor had heard just minutes before. "You're nothing but dead weight, Eleanor, a burden we can't shake off." The recording ceased, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Eleanor felt a strange mix of vindication and fresh hurt, hearing those words played back, undeniable and raw. Serafina's jaw dropped. She scrambled for an excuse, her mind racing. "Ethan, you know how stressed I've been lately with work, and the house, and your mother's demands," she began, her voice pleading, desperate to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, but Ethan cut her off, his finger already poised on his phone. He pressed play again. This time, a different recording, another snippet of Serafina's cruelty, revealed her berating Eleanor for leaving a single cup unwashed, threatening to throw her out if she didn't earn her keep. The words hung in the air, painting a picture of consistent, calculated malice, leaving no room for excuses or doubt. Ethan's voice, though still calm, began to carry an undeniable edge, rising with each damning revelation. He wasn't playing recordings anymore. He was reciting from memory, a grim litany of Serafina's abuses. "You called my mother pathetic, Serafina," he began, his eyes fixed on her, unblinking. "You told her she was a waste of space, that she was leeching off us. You made her eat her meals standing up, didn't you? Said she didn't deserve a seat at the table if she couldn't contribute more. You forbade her from using the good dishes, insisted she use chipped mugs and scratched plates, even when we had guests." Each accusation landed like a heavy stone, building an invisible wall between them. Serafina, her face now a patchwork of fear and frantic calculation, tried desperately to deflect. "She provoked me, Ethan. She knows how to push my buttons. And you're taking everything out of context." Her voice was shrill, cracking at the edges, a stark contrast to her earlier composed demeanor. "She's so passive-aggressive, always sighing, always looking at me with those sad eyes. It was manipulation, I tell you." But her words seemed to ignite something deeper within Ethan. His anger, which had been simmering just beneath the surface, finally broke free. It wasn't a loud, explosive rage, but a cold, terrifying fury. "Context?" He scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "The context is a woman, my mother, who cleans our house, who cooks our meals, who has given her entire life to making mine better. And she never asks for anything in return. Serafina, nothing, except basic human decency. Something you apparently ran out of a long time ago." Eleanor stood frozen beside them, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. She had never, not once in her son's 66 years, seen her diplomatic, always composed son so consumed by such raw, focused rage. He had always been the peacemaker, the one to smooth over conflicts, to find common ground. This fierce, uncompromising man was a stranger, yet in a way, he was the son she had always known, the one who protected those he loved. A tremor of something akin to hope, fragile but persistent, began to stir within her. Ethan continued, his voice heavy with a profound sense of betrayal. "I had to install cameras in my own home, Serafina. Do you understand that? I had to do it because I couldn't believe my own wife was capable of treating an elderly woman, my mother, like an animal, like a disposable inconvenience." He gestured around the dining room, at the very walls that had witnessed Serafina's cruelty. "I kept telling myself I was mistaken, that I was misinterpreting things, that no one I loved could be so cruel." Serafina's carefully constructed composure shattered completely, her face contorted, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and terror. "How long?" she shrieked, her voice raw, echoing through the room. "How long have you been spying on me, Ethan? What kind of husband does that?" 3 months, Ethan stated, his voice unwavering. "Ever since Mom lost 15 pounds in a single month, and I noticed she was jumping every time a door slammed. Ever since I found her hiding in her room, flinching when you walked past." He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at Eleanor. "And I remembered hearing you, Serafina, screaming at her, accusing her of ruining your life, of being a financial drain, of being a mistake." Eleanor, fresh tears blurring her vision, finally found her voice, a choked whisper. Did you hear me that day?" she asked, her voice trembling, referring to a particularly harrowing afternoon when Serafina had locked her out of the house in the rain, screaming abuses through the window. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with a deep, aching regret. "I heard everything, Mom," he confirmed, his voice gentle. "Every single word. I was on the phone, coming home from work, and I just heard it. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. That's when I installed the cameras." He turned back to Serafina, his expression hardening once more. "I knew that if I confronted you without proof, you would twist it. You'd turn it around on Mom, make her out to be the instigator, the senile old woman who just imagined things. I needed undeniable evidence, Serafina. For Mom's sake. And for my own." Suddenly, Serafina lunged forward, her hand outstretched, aiming for Ethan's phone. She moved with surprising speed, a desperate, animalistic instinct to destroy the evidence. But Ethan was quicker. He anticipated her move, smoothly pulling the phone. Serafina's anger erupted anew. "This isn't her home!" she screamed, her voice hoarse, raw with rage and fear. "This is my house, Ethan. Mine, and yours. She's just a guest who's overstayed her welcome, a parasite, taking advantage of our generosity." Ogre. Ethan stared at her, his expression a mixture of profound disappointment and a cold, calculating resolve. A long moment of silence passed, punctuated only by Serafina's ragged breathing. Then, Ethan spoke, his voice unnervingly calm, almost soft. "You're right, Serafina," he said, his words hanging heavy in the air. "This isn't Mom's home." He paused, letting the statement sink in, before delivering the crushing blow. "But it's not yours either. ATL's." With a deliberate movement, Ethan reached into his briefcase, which he had placed on a nearby chair. He pulled out a slim, legal-looking folder. He opened it, revealing several documents within. He pulled out the first one, a deed, and held it up, displaying the bold letters at the top. "The house, Serafina," he announced, his voice steady, "is solely in my name. Always has been. You never contributed a single cent to its purchase, its mortgage, or its upkeep. This was my home long before you ever walked through its door." He then pulled out another document. This one, a printout from a bank. "And while we're on the subject of contributions," he continued, his tone growing colder, "let's talk about your employment. Or rather, your lack of it. For the last 5 years, since you decided to take a break from work, every single expense in this household, from groceries to utilities to property taxes, has come either from my salary or, ironically, from my mother's Social Security checks, which she insisted on contributing, unaware of the abuse she would receive for her generosity." "You haven't earned a dime," Serafina stammered, her voice thin and reedy. I had some temporary setbacks, Ethan. You know how hard it is to find work in this economy, and I was trying to focus on managing the household." Ethan cut her off, his voice sharper now, piercing through her flimsy excuses. "Temporary setbacks?" he scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "No, Serafina. You weren't looking for employment. You were looking for someone to take care of you, someone to clean up after you, to cater to your whims, to fund your lifestyle, and to do it all without question. Someone to abuse." What Cality got us, the realization hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Serafina's cruelty, her constant belittling and demands, hadn't just been the byproduct of a difficult personality or a clash of wills. It had been calculated, a deliberate, cold manipulation. Serafina hadn't been trying to make Eleanor contribute. She had been trying to break her, to reduce her to a compliant servant, while simultaneously draining Ethan's resources. The thought sent a chill down Eleanor's spine, making her skin prickle. It was a level of malice she hadn't dared to imagine. Serafina weakly denied it, her protests growing fainter, less convincing. "That's not true. I loved you, Ethan. I only wanted a good life for us. For our family." Ethan didn't dignify her words with a direct response. Instead, he simply tapped his phone again. This time, the recording was different. It wasn't Serafina's voice directed at Eleanor, but a conversation, hushed and conspiratorial, between Serafina and a friend. The words that emerged, clear and damning, sent a fresh wave of nausea through Eleanor. "The old bat will get tired of it eventually, you know?" Serafina's voice purred on the recording, a cold, calculating tone that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "She'll either leave, or she'll be so grateful for a roof over her head. She'll do whatever I say. Suz. When that I see to power, when that I to power, and once she's out of the way, once she realizes her place, maybe then I can convince him to give me access to his accounts, or at least put my name on the house. I mean, he's so blind where she's concerned, he'll never suspect a thing." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the weight of Serafina's exposed treachery. Her carefully constructed world, built on lies and manipulation, collapsed in that instant, shattering into irreparable pieces around her. She stood there, frozen, her face ashen, her eyes wide with a horror that was finally, genuinely her own. Ethan's voice, quiet now, almost a whisper, sliced through the stillness. 3 months, Serafina. 3 months of documenting every cruel word, every calculated slight, every manipulative scheme. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you really think I was so naive, so blind, that I wouldn't see what you were doing to my mother, to my family, to me? His gaze was unwavering, cold and piercing. Eleanor felt her knees weaken. The sheer scope of Ethan's secret plan, his silent, meticulous dedication to gathering evidence, to protecting her, overwhelmed her. He had been quietly working behind the scenes for months, all while she endured the daily humiliation, believing herself utterly alone. Her son, her quiet diplomatic son, had been waging a war on her behalf, without her knowledge. A tear slipped down her cheek, a mixture of profound relief and an aching sorrow for what he must have witnessed. "Ethan," she whispered. Her voice choked with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" He turned to her then, and Eleanor saw that his own eyes were brimming with unshed tears. The raw emotion in his gaze was almost unbearable. "I needed her to hang herself with her own rope, Mom," he explained, his voice thick with pain and regret. "I knew her. I knew she'd twist things, deny everything. I needed irrefutable proof, concrete evidence that couldn't be disputed, that couldn't be explained away as context or misunderstanding. Especially if this ever went to court." Serafina, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally found her voice, a strangled whisper, laced with fear. "Court?" Ethan's expression, which had softened slightly for Eleanor, turned cold and utterly final as he looked back at Serafina. He reached into the legal folder again, pulling out a fresh set of documents. "Divorce court, Serafina," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth or emotion. "I filed the papers this morning. They've been served to your lawyer already." Serafina staggered back, clutching at the edge of the dining table, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't be serious," she breathed, shaking her head. You can't do this to me." Ethan remained unmoved, his resolve like granite. "You have until Friday to pack your things and vacate the premises," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Your lawyer will be in touch with mine regarding the details. But as of Friday, you will no longer be living in this house." Serafina's face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. "You can't throw me out," she shrieked, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "I'm your wife. We're married." "Again, you're a woman who's been psychologically abusing my elderly mother for 2 years, Serafina," Ethan retorted, his voice cutting like a knife. "You're a woman who married me under false pretenses, who schemed to take advantage of me and my family, and I have all the evidence to prove it. My lawyer is already preparing an emergency protective order for my mother, citing your pattern of abuse and harassment. So yes, Serafina, I can, and I will, throw you out. 18io. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with what happens next. You won't want to miss the shocking twists that are about to unfold." Eleanor felt a fragile bloom of hope in her chest, a sensation so foreign after years of despair that it almost felt like pain. Ethan had stood up for her. Finally, he had seen Serafina for what she was, and he was taking action. But beneath the relief, a persistent chill settled over her. Serafina's eyes, in those final moments, had held a glint of something deeply unsettling, a refusal to accept defeat, a dangerous, cornered animal intensity. Eleanor had a premonition that this was far from over. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the gentle hum of hushed voices drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented, she wondered if she had dreamt the previous day's dramatic confrontation. Then, the memories rushed back. The shattered plate, Serafina's venomous words, Ethan's quiet fury, the damning recordings, the cold declaration of divorce. She sat up in bed, the ache in her joints a stark reminder that it had all been terrifyingly real. Slowly, she rose, pulling on her robe and shuffling towards the kitchen. As she drew closer, She recognized Ethan's voice, speaking in a low, earnest tone. Another voice, deeper and more formal, was responding. She peeked around the corner and saw Ethan at the kitchen table, a steaming mug in his hand, facing a distinguished-looking man in a dark suit. A lawyer. Mr. Davison, she vaguely recalled Ethan mentioning. They were discussing Serafina. She heard snippets. Potential criminal charges. Emotional distress. Elder abuse. Mr. Davison nodded, his expression serious. The recordings you provided, Ethan, are more than enough. Not just for a swift divorce, but potentially for criminal charges, especially with the documented pattern of abuse, the intent to cause harm, the psychological manipulation. It's all there. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. A look of deep concern etched on his face. Serafina isn't going to go quietly, Mr. Davison. I know her. She'll fight. She'll try to spin this, make herself out to be the victim. She always does. It was then that Eleanor decided to make her presence known. She stepped into the kitchen, a fragile smile on her face. Good morning, she offered, her voice a little hoarse. Both men looked up, startled. Ethan immediately rose, moving to help her to a chair. Mom, you're up early, he said, his voice laced with concern. This is Mr. Davison, my attorney. We were just discussing, well, everything. Mr. Davison offered her a reassuring smile. Mrs. Vance, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Your son has been exceptionally proactive in protecting you. I must commend his thoroughness. He gestured to a neatly stacked pile of documents on the table. She left last night. Ethan informed Eleanor, his voice neutral. Packed 2 suitcases, didn't say a word. I found a note on the counter this morning. Just, I'm going to my sister's. Typical Serafina, avoiding confrontation until she can regroup. Mr. Davison pushed a thick manila folder across the table towards Eleanor. Your son. Mrs. Vance, he said, his eyes serious, has been preparing for this moment for quite some time. What he's uncovered goes far beyond a simple marital dispute. Ethan picked up the folder, his gaze meeting Eleanor's. I hired a private investigator, Mom, about 3 months ago. After I started setting up the cameras and realized how bad things truly were, I knew I needed to dig deeper. What we found was disturbing. He opened the folder and presented Eleanor with a thick, detailed report, filled with photographs and timelines. Serafina has done this before, Mom. Twice. Mr. Davison took over, his voice grave. It's a pattern, Mrs. Vance. A very calculated, very disturbing pattern. Serafina would target older, financially stable men, usually with an elderly parent living with them, or one who was likely to move in soon. Once she was married and established, she would systematically make the parent's life unbearable. The goal was always the same, either drive them away, or something far worse. Eleanor felt a cold dread seep into her bones. She planned this? She whispered, her voice barely audible, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The sheer premeditation of it, the chilling detachment, was almost incomprehensible. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow. He began to detail the grim outcomes of Serafina's past marriages, laid bare in the investigator's report. In her first marriage, the husband's father, who was living with them, passed away from natural causes shortly after Serafina married into the family. The family attributed it to stress, but the PI found some inconsistencies. In her second marriage, the husband's mother suffered a severe stroke and ended up in a nursing home, completely incapacitated. Both times, Serafina was the sole caregiver or had significant influence over their care. Both times, she benefited financially from their incapacitation or death. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Her hands trembled as she gripped the table's edge, her mind, racing through the years of subtle gaslighting, the emotional abuse, the constant fatigue she'd experienced, finally connected the horrific dots. And you think she was trying to kill me? She asked, the words raw, tearing from her throat. The thought was so monstrous, so utterly terrifying, that it was almost impossible to voice. Ethan looked at her, his own eyes brimming with tears, mirroring her fear and pain. He reached across the table, taking her trembling hand in his. His voice was thick with emotion, a mix of regret and fierce protectiveness. "Yes, Mom," he confirmed, his voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with an awful certainty. "I think that was exactly what she was trying to do." Mr. Davison, sensing Eleanor's profound shock and fear, quickly interjected, pulling her back from the precipice of that terrifying thought. "While direct intent to kill might be difficult to prove in a court of law, Mrs. Vance," he explained gently, his voice firm yet compassionate, "what we can undeniably prove is a pattern of behavior designed to cause extreme emotional distress and physical deterioration in elderly individuals. That, combined with her history and the psychological manipulation, paints a very damning picture. It constitutes elder abuse, plain and simple, and it carries significant legal consequences." Eleanor turned to Ethan, her voice still trembling. "How long, Ethan?" she asked, the words barely a whisper. "How long had you suspected something like this?" Ethan exhaled slowly, a heavy, regretful sound. "About 6 months, Mom," he admitted, his gaze falling to his hands. "It started subtle. Your weight loss, the way you'd flinch when Serafina entered a room, the way you started looking so afraid. I dismissed it at first, blamed myself for not spending enough time at home, for the stress of my job. But then, as I started observing, really observing, I saw the patterns, and once the PI started digging, her whole playbook became horrifyingly clear," he continued, his voice heavy with a grim understanding. "Serafina targets financially stable, but emotionally vulnerable men. Men who, like me, might be busy with work, maybe a bit naive, and who have aging parents they're trying to care for. She inserts herself, gains trust, and then systematically isolates and abuses the parent, hoping they'll either leave, become completely subservient, or worse." Tears, hot and abundant, streamed down Eleanor's face. "Why didn't you tell me, Ethan?" she whispered, the raw hurt in her voice echoing the years of loneliness and despair. "I thought you didn't care anymore. I thought you believed her. That you thought I was just a burden." Ethan's face crumpled with guilt, his own eyes welling up. He reached for her hand again, squeezing it tightly. "Mom, no, never. I never thought that. But I knew Serafina. She's a master manipulator. If I had confronted her without irrefutable evidence, she would have turned it around, made me doubt myself, made you out to be the irrational one. She would have found a way to blame you, to twist the narrative. I needed proof. Mom, proof that would hold up in court, proof that would show everyone, without a shadow of a doubt, exactly what she was. I had to protect you, and that meant being patient, even when it killed me to watch." Mr. Davison nodded solemnly. "He was protecting you the only way he could, Mrs. Vance. Trust me, in cases like these, solid, undeniable evidence is paramount." Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to process the enormity of what her son had done and what he had endured in silence. "The cameras," she murmured, remembering the tiny black device Ethan had pulled out yesterday. "How many? Where did you put them?" Ethan gave a mirthless chuckle. 7, Mom. Hidden in plain sight in various rooms, the main hallways, even in the laundry room. They documented everything, every cruel word, every slight, every time she made you feel small or worthless. He tapped his phone, and a video clip began to play. It showed Serafina, her face contorted in a mask of fury, cornering Eleanor in the cramped laundry room, screaming at her about some perceived inadequacy, her finger jabbing inches from Eleanor's face. Eleanor watched, horrified, not just at the memory, but at the cold, calculated intimidation in Serafina's eyes, a theatrical performance designed to break her spirit. The private investigator also uncovered something else, Mr. Davison added, his voice grim. Serafina had been researching techniques for psychological manipulation of elderly people. She even owned several books on the subject, which we've documented. She wasn't just lashing out, Mrs. Vance. This was deliberate, A systematic campaign to erode your self-worth and control you. The realization was like a cold, sharp knife to Eleanor's gut. Her feelings of worthlessness, the gnawing sensation that she was going crazy, that she was imagining things, that she was truly a burden. It had all been deliberately orchestrated. Every doubt, every moment of despair, had been a direct result of Serafina's calculated cruelty. The horrifying truth brought a fresh wave of tears, but this time, they were mixed with a fierce, quiet anger. Mr. Davison then outlined the legal path forward. The divorce itself will be straightforward, given the evidence. Serafina will likely lose any claim to marital assets due to her fraudulent intent and lack of financial contribution. We'll also pursue a permanent restraining order to ensure she cannot come near you, Mrs. Vance. Ethan has already initiated the paperwork for that as well. Ethan and Mr. Davison exchanged a look, a subtle nod passing between them. A new tension settled in the air, suggesting there was more to uncover. Ethan cleared his throat, his gaze unwavering as he looked at Eleanor. "There's something else you need to know, Mom," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "Serafina isn't just dangerous because of her pattern of abuse. She's dangerous because she's desperate." He slid another document across the table. It was a bank statement. Eleanor squinted at the figures, her eyes widening as she recognized her own account details. Then, her gaze fell upon a series of transfers, large sums of money leaving her Social Security direct deposit account. A cold dread settled in her stomach. "She's been stealing from you, Mom," Ethan stated, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "For the last 6 months, she's been diverting $14,000 from your Social Security direct deposit, funneling it into an account the PI tracked, an account in her sister's name, just in case." "It's bread," Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. $14,000. Money she desperately needed. Money she had worked her whole life for. The betrayal felt even deeper, more insidious, knowing it was not just emotional but financial. "This theft," Ethan continued, his voice grim, "is what makes her truly dangerous now. She's lost her comfortable life, she's lost her access to my money, and now she's lost her access to yours. In her previous schemes, when she realized her plan was unraveling, she escalated. She became more aggressive, more desperate, more willing to take extreme measures. We need to be prepared, Mom. This isn't over," Eleanor gasped, the number echoing hollowly in the quiet kitchen. $14,000, she repeated, her voice a disbelieving whisper. It wasn't just the money, though that was a significant blow. It was the sheer audacity, the cold-blooded calculation behind it. She had trusted Serafina with her finances, with her well-being, and she had been utterly exploited. Ethan nodded grimly, his jaw tight. When her previous schemes started to unravel, Serafina's pattern was to escalate. She'd spread false rumors about her husband, file false reports with authorities, even attempt to manipulate other family members against him. Anything to discredit him and shift the blame. Eleanor felt a cold knot of terror tighten in her stomach. Is she going to do the same to us?" she asked, her voice trembling. The thought of her reputation, her relationship with her son, being dragged through the mud by Serafina's vindictive machinations was deeply unsettling. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with a grim resolve. "She is going to try everything she can to destroy our relationship, Mom, to make you doubt me, to make me doubt you. She'll try to twist every single thing, but we're ready for her this time." Everwell's. Just as he finished speaking, Eleanor's phone, which she had placed on the table, vibrated, displaying Serafina's name. Eleanor flinched, staring at the screen as if it were a venomous snake. Ethan's eyes, sharp and alert, immediately locked onto the device. "Don't answer it," Mr. Davison advised calmly, reaching into his briefcase, but Ethan shook his head, frantically gesturing towards the phone. "No, Mom, answer it. Put it on speakerphone." He pushed a small, unobtrusive recording device towards Mr. Davison, who quickly activated it, placing it discreetly next to Eleanor's phone. "We need to know what she's planning." Eleanor hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound of Serafina's name, the thought of her voice, sent a fresh wave of dread through her. But Ethan's urgency propelled her. With a trembling finger, she pressed the green icon. "Eleanor?" Serafina's voice, sweet as honey and twice as poisonous, floated through the speaker. It was soft, fragile, imbued with a vulnerability Eleanor had rarely heard. "Eleanor, please. I know you must hate me right now, but I just really need to talk to you. I want to explain why I've been so horrible to you." Ethan, his face a mask of furious concentration, quickly scribbled a note on a napkin and pushed it across the table to Eleanor. "Don't believe her. This is part of her pattern. She's trying to manipulate you." Eleanor saw the words, understood the warning. Yet, years of being a mother, of giving the benefit of the doubt, of seeing the best in people, had conditioned her. Despite everything, a small, irrational part of her wanted to believe that there might be some genuine remorse, some spark of humanity in Serafina. She listened, her guard instinctively lowering, even as her mind screamed caution. Serafina's voice grew more tremulous, punctuated by what sounded like muffled sobs. "Eleanor, I'm so ashamed. My behavior, it came from a place of fear. Deep, dark fear. My childhood was so difficult, you know. I was always so scared of being abandoned, of being alone, of losing everything. And when I met Ethan, I truly loved him. I thought I'd finally found my safe place." She paused, a dramatic sniffle echoing through the phone. "But then, when you moved in, I panicked. I felt like I was losing him to you. Like I was going to be replaced. I was so afraid of losing Ethan, and it made me lash out. It made me do terrible things. I know it's no excuse, but I truly am sorry." Eleanor felt a strange, unsettling pull. Serafina's words, though she knew intellectually they were probably calculated, resonated with a deep, primal fear of abandonment that many people carried. Could it be true? Could her cruelty have stemmed from a place of profound insecurity, rather than pure malice? Could there be a flicker of genuine remorse beneath the performance? Eleanor found herself softening, a familiar maternal instinct stirring within her, wondering if Serafina's vulnerability, however unlikely, could possibly be genuine. "Serafina," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the turmoil within her. "What you did to me was more than just being afraid. You were deliberately cruel. You made me feel worthless. You tried to break me." Another pause, then more choked sobs from the other end of the line. "I know, Eleanor, I know. And I promise I'll make it up to you. I'll do anything. I need you to understand. I'm going to be a mother myself now. I found out a few weeks ago." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "I'm pregnant." Ethan went completely white, his eyes wide with shock, staring at the phone. Mr. Davison's pen, mid-sentence, stopped abruptly, a faint scratch mark left on his notepad. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat, a cold dread washing over her. A baby? Ethan's baby? This was a game changer. A nuclear bomb dropped into the middle of their carefully constructed defense. "I'm 3 months along, Eleanor," Serafina continued, her voice now a strange mix of fragility and desperate hope. "I only found out shortly after you moved in. And then I panicked. I panicked at the thought of losing Ethan, of him leaving me, especially with you here, and then with a baby coming. I was so scared I'd be alone again, with a child. That's why I lashed out. That's why I was so awful. I was just trying to protect my family, the only way I knew how." Eleanor watched the conflict rage across Ethan's face. The mention of a grandchild, a baby, had visibly shaken him, tearing at the carefully constructed facade of his resolve. His eyes darted from the phone to Eleanor, a desperate plea for guidance in their depths. Ethan reached for the phone, intending to speak to Eleanor privately, to consult with her. But Serafina's voice, now sharp with urgency, cut him off. "Please don't let him shut me out, Eleanor," she pleaded, her voice thick with fake tears. This baby deserves a chance. It's an innocent life. Don't let Ethan cast us both aside because of my mistakes." Oh, on her heartstrings, a grandchild, The thought of it, pure and innocent, twisted with the knowledge of Serafina's deceit, she wavered, caught between her certainty of Serafina's cruelty and the sudden, overwhelming prospect of Ethan's child. I need to think, Eleanor murmured into the phone, her voice uncertain, but Serafina's facade of vulnerability was already starting to crack, an edge creeping into her voice. There's no time to think, Eleanor. Ethan has already filed divorce papers. He's trying to throw me out. What kind of father would do that to his pregnant wife? Serafina, Eleanor said, her resolve hardening slightly, pushing back against the emotional tidal wave. What happened between us was more than just fear or mistakes. It was abuse. Deliberate, calculated abuse. Serafina's mask slipped further, her voice losing its fragility. It was a misunderstanding. Stress and pregnancy hormones. You're taking everything out of context. That was all Ethan needed. With a furious grunt, he snatched the phone from Eleanor's hand. You are a monster, Serafina, he snarled, his voice raw with disgust, completely abandoning any pretense of calm. And I don't believe for 1 second that you're pregnant. This is just another one of your disgusting lies to manipulate us. Fred. A chilling silence fell from Serafina's end of the line, palpable even through the speaker. When she finally spoke, her voice was utterly devoid of emotion, an icy calm replacing the earlier histrionics. You want proof, Ethan? Fine. Be at Dr. Albright's office at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And you, Eleanor, you come too. You can both witness your monster carrying your grandchild. With a sharp click, she hung up, leaving behind a profound, unnerving silence. Ethan stood there, phone still clutched in his hand, his face a mixture of rage and utter bewilderment. She's lying, Mom. She has to be. This is just another one of her games. He looked at Mr. Davison, who merely shook his head, his expression unreadable. But if she's not, if she's telling the truth. Ethan trailed off, his voice cracking. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes wide and tormented. Everything changes, Mom. Everything changes. That has happened. He began to pace, running a hand through his hair, his torment evident. I can't divorce a pregnant woman. Not if it's my child. I can't abandon my child, Mom, even if the mother is an abuser. His voice was filled with anguish, torn between his duty to Eleanor and the potential responsibility of fatherhood. Eleanor watched his agony, her heart aching for him. She saw the profound moral dilemma tearing him apart. In that moment, the maternal instinct to protect her son, to ease his suffering, surged within her, overwhelming her own pain and fear. If Serafina is really pregnant, Ethan, she said, her voice soft but firm, making the ultimate sacrifice. I can find somewhere else to live. I don't want to cause any more trouble. Ethan stopped pacing abruptly, turning to her with a fierce, almost desperate look in his eyes. No, Mom, absolutely not. You are not leaving. Serafina is not driving you out. Not now, not ever. This is your home, and it's going to stay your home. Despite the warnings, the doubts, and the undeniable history of Serafina's deceit, a sliver of hope, a desperate longing for a grandchild, for a future where some good could come from this mess, flickered within Eleanor's heart. They arrived at Dr. Albright's office just before 3. Serafina was already there, seated demurely in a floral sundress, looking fragile and vulnerable. A stark contrast to the venomous woman of yesterday. The receptionist greeted them with a warm smile. Ah, Mrs. Henderson. Right on time for your 12-week appointment. Dr. Albright will see you shortly. Henderson. Eleanor registered the name, a subtle shift in Serafina's assumed identity, but dismissed it for the overwhelming anxiety of the moment. Moments later, they were ushered into an examination room. Dr. Albright, a kind-faced woman, entered and, after a brief, professional greeting, began the ultrasound. Eleanor held her breath, watching the screen. And then, there it was. A tiny, pulsating flicker, unmistakable. A strong, rhythmic heartbeat filled the room, amplified by the machine. A baby, unmistakably a baby, swam into view on the screen, a small, developing form. Ethan gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. Tears welled in his eyes, his carefully constructed walls crumbling. The raw emotion on his face was clear. He was moved, completely disarmed by the sight of his child. Eleanor felt a profound wave of defeat wash over her. Serafina had won. She had played her ultimate card, and it had worked. Back home, the silence in the car on the way back had been suffocating. Mr. Davison, grim-faced, had made a few calls. Now, seated once more at the kitchen table, he laid out another set of documents. "Ethan, Eleanor," he began, his voice serious. "My investigator just tracked Serafina's movements from the past few days. It seems our Mrs. Henderson has been quite busy." He pushed a printed report towards them. "She visited a fertility clinic 3 days ago, a clinic that specializes in termination, and she was there again this morning, just hours before she called you, Eleanor, with her pregnancy announcement. It seems our Serafina was ensuring her ultimate deception would be as convincing as possible." Mr. Davison, his face grim, cleared his throat. "With all due respect to the doctor, Ethan, Eleanor," he began, his voice deliberate, "we need to verify the authenticity of that ultrasound. Images can be manipulated, and given Serafina's history, we cannot afford to take anything at face value." Before he could elaborate, the front door burst open, and Serafina stormed into the dining room, her face a mask of righteous fury. She had clearly overheard Mr. Davison's words. Her eyes, narrowed and blazing, fixed on Eleanor and Ethan. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice shrill, sending her teacup clattering to the floor. "How dare you spy on me and then question my pregnancy? After everything I've been through. After all the stress you've put me under?" Ethan, his shock now replaced by a cold, hard anger, rose from his seat. "Sit down, Serafina," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "We're not finished here." Serafina recoiled slightly at his tone, but her rage quickly resurfaced. "This is a lie. A conspiracy. You're just trying to get rid of me so you can have your precious mother all to yourself. To maybe thinking to do." Eleanor, despite her fear, felt a sudden clarity. A small detail from the doctor's office clicked into place. "Dr. Albright called you Mrs. Henderson," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, cutting through Serafina's histrionics. "But you never legally changed your name, Serafina. You're still Mrs. Vance." Ethan's eyes snapped to Serafina, a new piece of the puzzle falling into place for him as well. "You used a false identity," he said, his voice a lethal whisper. "You pretended to be pregnant under a false identity to deceive the doctor and us." Mr. Davison, already on his phone, began speaking into it, relaying the details of the doctor's visit, the name Mrs. Henderson, and the suspicious circumstances. A few agonizing minutes later, he put the phone on speaker, his face a grim mask. Dr. Albright's voice, clear and professional, echoed through the quiet room. "I apologize for the confusion. Upon checking our records, the ultrasound images shown to Mr. Vance and his mother were indeed archive images from a patient who gave birth 6 months ago. They were accessed without authorization from our internal system. We have reported a security breach and are investigating further." Mrs. Vance, or rather, the woman who presented herself as Mrs. Henderson, left the clinic immediately after the scan. "I am deeply sorry for any distress this has caused. It seems." A cold, heavy silence descended upon the room. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung in the air. Ethan slowly turned to Serafina, his eyes piercing through her last defenses. "You're not pregnant," he stated, his voice devoid of any emotion, utterly flat. Serafina, her face now completely devoid of color, sagged. Her carefully constructed web of lies had unraveled, thread by agonizing thread, leaving her exposed and defeated, the fight drained out of her, replaced by a desperate, pathetic fragility. I was trying to save our marriage," she stammered, her voice barely audible, a broken whisper. "By lying about a baby. I thought it would give you something more important to focus on than your precious relationship with him." She gestured vaguely between Ethan and Eleanor, a bitter resentment returning to her eyes. "I thought it would make you choose me. Make you forget about all the other things." is not resid. Her gaze finally fell on Eleanor, and for a fleeting moment, a flash of genuine, unadulterated hatred crossed her features. You're not abused, she spat, her voice regaining a fraction of its former venom. You're a selfish old woman who came between a husband and his wife. You're the reason everything went wrong. 7. Eleanor simply stared at her, an eerie calm settling over her. Serafina's final outburst, stripped bare of all pretense, confirmed everything. There was no remorse, no genuine fear, just a narcissistic rage at being thwarted. Ethan, however, had reached his breaking point. His voice, a lethal whisper, cut through the air, vibrating with controlled fury. Get out of my house, Serafina. Get out right now, before I call the police and have you arrested for theft, fraud, and elder abuse. You have exactly 5 minutes. Serafina recoiled, her face contorted in a final, ugly snarl. She glared at them both one last time, a defeated, poisonous viper, before turning and storming out of the house, the slam of the front door echoing through the now empty space. Eleanor felt a profound, almost dizzying relief wash over her. It wasn't just that Serafina was gone. It was the realization that Ethan had chosen her, unequivocally and without hesitation, not because she was his mother, but because he saw her, respected her, and loved her enough to fight for her, even against the woman he had married. The unconditional love and respect she had craved for so long was finally, truly hers. 6 months later, the house felt lighter, almost breathable. The divorce was finalized, swift and undeniable, with the mountain of evidence Ethan had accumulated. Serafina, stripped of any claims to his assets, had vanished, leaving no trace, a ghost of a nightmare. The restraining order ensured she couldn't return, and Eleanor finally felt safe. Life began to bloom anew. Ethan, cautiously, revealed he was dating someone new. Ava, a kind, genuine teacher he had met through work. Eleanor felt a genuine surge of happiness for him, a warm feeling replacing the old anxieties. I'd love to meet her, Ethan, she said, her smile real and heartfelt. I truly would. Eleanor herself had undergone a remarkable transformation. She had gained back the 15 pounds, and more. Her eyes, once shadowed with fear, now sparkled with a newfound vitality. She had started a gentle yoga class for seniors, finding unexpected peace and strength in the movements. She'd joined a book club at the local library, making new friends who cherished her wisdom and laughter. Her days were no longer filled with dread, but with purpose and joy. One afternoon, as Eleanor was tending to her small herb garden, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Ava. Ethan had told her Ava might stop by, but her unexpected visit felt like a delightful surprise. Ava emerged from the car, carrying a small potted plant, her smile warm and genuine. She didn't see Eleanor as competition or a burden, but as a person, as a friend. As they sat on the porch, sipping iced tea and chatting, Eleanor felt a lightness in her heart she hadn't experienced in years. The future, once a daunting prospect, now stretched out before her, filled with the promise of joy, purpose, and the gentle, unwavering love of her son and the wonderful people he brought into her life.